Hi there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Erin from Everlearning, Haley from Taking a Kinder Path, and myself, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, consent-based learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us.
Welcome back to the virtual kitchen table. So it's Erin here and Ashley today. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, Erin.
And we have Anne today from Oh By the By. Hello, Anne.
Hello.
Anne came very short notice today, which we are super thankful for. We had planned, Ashley and I had planned to be talking today with Haley about a book review she had done about connection parenting. Well, I guess the book review and the topic of connection parenting. Haley's not able to be here today, and we wanted to kind of table that topic. So we're really off the cuff today. So we were like, okay, what else could we talk about? And something that's like, I don't know. I mean, it's been on my mind always since I started homeschooling, which is the idea of like accessible, like having homeschooling be as accessible as possible. I don't think we're nowhere near it being fully accessible to people, but being as accessible as possible. Or if people are in a position that they can figure out how to do that, just making it as, practical and accessible as possible. And so, and because you always have really cool things that you do, because I think part of this is like not just finding a cheap way to homeschool, but finding a way to have like a rich and interesting life without feeling like you've got to always go for all the bells and whistles. And I feel like something that you share a lot, both in your writing, your longer form writing, your social media, and definitely in the online community, the virtual kitchen table community. It's just like, there's just such a range. I'm trying to think what the word is. Like, there's just so many things that you guys do that I feel like in some ways are quite similar to the way that we do things. And I think particularly since the pandemic, I've just noticed a lot of things popping up, which while they're great, I wonder sometimes if they add an extra pressure to people or financial pressure. So yeah, so we're kind of talking about the financial accessibility of having like a rich and abundant homeschool life. So in my 45 minutes ago deciding with Ashley what we might talk about, I remembered that I have a blog post on the Everlearning website, and it's called Abundant Homeschooling Doesn't Need to Cost a Lot of Money. So I thought maybe I'll just read a little bit from the beginning, and maybe that might get some thoughts circulating for us. So, okay, so it begins. There are some phrases that don't evoke images of abundance. Home educating on a shoestring budget. Home educating for less. Home educating on the cheap. These each came to mind when I was thinking of a title for this. They feel limiting though. A shoestring gives me the picture of reaching out only so far and not very. The word less gives me the sense of, well, less than something else, substandard. On the cheap sounds like trying to get away with something or just getting the bare minimum. I think it's safe to say that no parent is looking for a limited, substandard, bare minimum of an education and life for their child. And yet there's a paradox. Home education requires time. It might not require the exact type or amount of time that people imagine, but it does still require time. And that means that one or both parents might be giving up at least some degree of income, if not the full amount. And I go on to do some disclaimers about that. But then I go on back here to talk about making do with less doesn't sound helpful when beginning homeschooling. Something that you hear you need to buy resources and create a rich, adventurous life for. What if there was a way to live and learn simply, meaningful, and yes, inexpensively, living richly with less money? And so then in bold, I just have, yes, life can be rich without spending a whole pile of money. Um, and then I give sort of my first point, which I won't go any further with, but I'll just name it. So it says, an abundant mindset is the first resource to gather. Okay. So that's a starting point for us. And I do just want to say that this topic, well, not what we'd originally planned to discuss today, is probably the one I have thought about the most over the years. I can't honestly think of much I've thought about more than this. Possibly because, as you both know, I think a lot about like community and resources and things like that. But also because we had so many things kind of happen that on paper, it would never have made sense to be homeschooling, right? So, we had sudden job loss, but even before the sudden job loss, there was a big shift. And then some stuff happened with our house that required like a very unexpected amount of money. So it was interesting, like when my husband lost his job, like overnight, like they told everybody on Friday, don't come in Monday. And I think many people would have said, oh, maybe we're going to have to put the kids in school. And it's funny, like it never even occurred to me. It never occurred to me. And I'm not saying it shouldn't have. I'm not saying people shouldn't make that decision. But I just feel like so strongly that there are ways to do things, and they don't work for everybody. They don't work for every circumstance. I think if we kind of debunk that idea that everybody should find a way to homeschool, that's not where I want to go with this. But what I think I mean by that is it's put me into a mindset of like, what are the ways that make it more accessible? What could I do to help somebody else figure that out? What other ideas can people be sharing? So it's definitely something on my mind, because I don't think any of us want home education to be just for a certain type of family or a certain type of income level. So yeah, I've got, of course, as usual, a lot of other things on my mind about it, but I just want to pause in case either of you want to jump in with anything.
I would say similar to you. Of course, I'm a single parent homeschooler. I came from a single parent homeschool. It's not something where you hear ka-ching in the background. It's the same way. There was never a question. I never had a thought of, and I've had people say when I've had times of some financial struggle, why don't you just put him in school? It's like, no, that's literally not an option, especially having been homeschooled. To me, it is not an option to give that up. I've heard people talk about it being a sacrifice to homeschool. To me, it would be a bigger sacrifice not to homeschool. I think a term, like when you talk about all the different terms for it, I think one that would come to mind to me is sustainable homeschooling. It's just like your life, whatever you do in life, like if you have a hobby or an interest or something you go to regularly, it has to be sustainable where it fits. Even, redoing your home or whatever else, it has to be sustainable and fit in your budget. And if it's something that's really a full part of your life, you will find a way to make it sustainable. For instance, like we have gotten into board games, over the last year. Lots and lots and lots of games. We love games, which means back in the day when we had a couple games, I would, click Amazon and buy a game. I can't do that now. It's like I want to have the games. We want to have a bunch, which means I'm bargain hunting. I'm looking used. I'm hunting. I'm holding out longer. So it's like if you have something that really becomes a part of your life, I think you kind of naturally look for ways to make it sustainable, and you might learn how to reuse things and just hunt in different directions rather than if you're dabbling in it, it might be, I'm just going to walk over here to the store and just buy it outright. So to me, it's very much that homeschooling is just another part of life. I'm not sure I paused between being the student and being the teacher. I kept it, I was still learning too. So it becomes a sustainable part of your life and you figure out how to manage that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking too. I'm excited about this topic because I'm thinking about how it's going to be helpful for other people. Like I know it would have been helpful for me to hear other homeschoolers talk about this stuff because so unlike Anne, I went through school and didn't know any homeschool families. So I kind of had to make a shift in understanding like what learning looks like and what it can look like outside of school, which is a pretty big shift and that takes time. So listening to other homeschoolers talk about that through their experience, you can start to get a sense of, or at least start making that shift and understanding that it can look quite different. Because I know at first you think, and I'm sure we'll get into all this, but you can think like, we need the homeschool room in the house and we need all the materials that they would have access to if they were to go to school. And we would need to, you know, because of course, like you mentioned, Aaron, like parents don't want to limit their kids. They want to make sure they have all the things and all the opportunity. But once you start hearing how other homeschoolers do things and you start, connecting with other homeschoolers and going out into the world and meeting, you just see that it's kind of a whole own world. And it can look very differently. And then it's like, oh, yeah, of course, it doesn't have to cost a whole lot. So, yeah, I think, and I like the word sustainable too, because many of us, I know some people might just plan to homeschool or they only end up homeschooling for a year or two, but I think a lot of times that's not the case. So, figuring out, um, yeah, how to make it sustainable in all the different ways. And I think we will cover many practical ideas today.
Yeah, I think so too. And I like, and the this is why I love talking to other people because I hadn't even thought about the word sustainable, which is weird because I use that word a lot, but I hadn't thought about it in like connection with this, but that's so much what it is because I think um too, if people are serious about it, it's you are maybe looking longer term. I mean, you're like, and you described you're very much looking longer term. So it's like not what are some inexpensive resources I can find, or what's a way I can flip this to make it less expensive, and like that can be part of it. But when you use the word sustainable, sorry, it just makes me think about like how do we incorporate this way of doing things into our life? How do we, how does this kind of be part of our day to day? And I think something I just want to say, because I think people can be quite, I've heard and seen banter back and forth about this for years, and I in person, and I see it online as well, is this idea of like, on the one hand, people talking about homeschooling being a privilege, and on the other hand, people talking about homeschooling a sacrifice. And I think it's like it's both. Right? It's both. I think it's hard when you have given up a lot to any of us or anybody, when you have given up a fair bit to do it, whether that's your own career path or whether that's actual like material things, certainly time, that would definitely be one. And then when you hear people say, oh, it's a privilege, it's hard to hear that when you've worked so hard to figure something out. But I think the flip of that is, I think it's really hard for people. There are situations for it's just really hard to figure out how it could work in certain circumstances. And so I think everybody running around saying, no, everybody can do this, it's just a choice or whatever, that can really be hard for people too. So I think I just want to kind of say this somewhere near the beginning of this conversation, that I feel like there's a lot of nuance there to all of that. That itself could be a whole conversation, I think. But yeah, I feel like it's both. It's both. It's so dependent. And I think the other thing that it's taken me a long time to come to, because over the years, especially because I was co-facilitating a pretty large local group, people would, I'd have, maybe the librarian would send people to me, or people would just talk to me. and others that had kind of been doing things for a while, and they would want to know how to do it, or they would want to know enough about it to see if it was something they were interested in doing. And what I started to realize over time, because several years ago, I was very much like, yes, anybody can make this work. And I would spend large amounts of time with people troubleshooting, and I would lend resources. I would sit at somebody's house and talk to them about how it could look for their family. I tend to be kind of like a possibilities person. So, and that's what I do for work. I do vision planning with families, right? So to me, I'm like a possibilities person. So I would bring that to this kind of homeschool world, and I needed to step back at some point and realize that there's something else at play beyond how much money a family has, or there's a level of like, there's just a certain type of resourcefulness, or a certain type of like Anne, when you're describing what you were talking about, how it was never a question. Drive isn't quite the word I'm looking for. It's more of a conviction, maybe. I think there's a certain conviction that people have to have. I think for some people, certain personality traits help, but it's not always about money either, right? It's I don't know. I don't know. There's just something else there that allows, I think, some of us to be able to go for a walk in a meadow and find that as rich an experience as if we had signed up for a forest school program. That makes sense?
Yeah.
It makes
I
a
would
lot
also
of
say
sense.
it's a confidence thing too, because how many people do you see starting out who say, I'm not sure I can teach them what they need to know. I'm not sure I'm like smart enough to handle when they get to this age. So it's part that too of it's almost like a learning to let go, because which of us knows everything, right? Like none of us are experts in all things. And so it's not so much that you have to be confident in how much your brain holds as you have to be confident in your ability to find things and make things happen. So it kind of confidence and resourcefulness, I think there it kind of ties in where it's like it's not about knowing it all, it's about knowing how to make it happen, regardless of the money or the academic level or whatever else it is. And to what you were saying a moment ago about privilege, I would also say that while even as a kid, the only other homeschool family I knew was also single parents. So my world was always like one caregiver parenting at the same time. These were all small families. So I have one child. My father had two. That family had two. If I had four or five, I'm not sure I can make that one happen, So that's my end of privilege. Because I did think of that term when this topic came up, because I had a friend who had really felt burned by family members talking about them being just privileged enough to do this, so lucky to do it. And it's like they both work, they have a very modest house that they have renovated themselves. Like it's not that they're rolling in money either. They have made it happen. Again, they have one child and they do work for themselves and can work out at the house. So yeah, is definitely nuanced, and a lot of things are tied together.
Yeah, and then the other thing, and Aaron, I don't know if you were getting at this at all or not, but what came up for me was, and I'm just going to use the word capacity because that's the way I think of it for myself. So, people will often ask, like, do you always plan to homeschool? And I say, and I think that I like to try to assume that we will, or that we always want our kids to have the option to homeschool. But I do also wonder how my own capacity and my husband's capacity, that could shift as well. So, I think sometimes it might feel easier to some parents to homeschool when the kids are really young, and then it might feel more challenging as they get older. Aside from the academics, even just, I'm not thinking about, because I know that that's a common one, right? Like, well, I don't know how I'll homeschool them in high school. I, I just think I'll outsource or something, figure it, like you said, and have the confidence to figure it out. But things shift and change when you're a household with teenagers versus kids. And I do like to try to stay open-minded, and I think about how my own capacity plays a factor in whether we'll be able to, and all the more reason to try to think about that word sustainability, because we do have a goal of
we don't have our family doesn't have a goal of always home educating, but we do have the goal of trying to keep it as an option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing on that is like when you're talking about keeping going into the later years and you're hoping you have that capacity. I would say that's probably another point where I have a sort of privilege in that of it's so much more lifestyle than school at this point that it would be a really weird shift for me to change and to go the other way. So because it's just so like it's so natural because I've had people say to me, I'm not sure I could do it. And I have things like that where it's like mentally on some things I'll just start to wear down and be like, whoo, it's just a lot. I need to take a break. And like this doesn't really enter that realm for me just because I've been doing it forever, you know? So I recognize not everybody's going to have that same sense. To them, it's something they're very actively doing. Mine sort of goes on autopilot in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to try to decide who, because there's a lot of stuff there. So Ashley, your word capacity. So yes, that's very much part of and I think capacity is like, when I'm thinking about capacity, I'm thinking about, so we could think about it a few different ways. So originally I was thinking that was part of, capacity as a parent. Now that might be capacity due to your particular circumstance. Like as Anne's saying, maybe you have 5 kids, right? Or maybe you have 1 kid and that actually feels more difficult for you because it's not spread out. Like I don't think we can't always assume that certain dynamics are easier than other dynamics, right? Or maybe the particular personality or considerations that you're figuring out for a particular child. Maybe you tend to be fairly high capacity with people, but there's some friction there or friction between, I mean, I've talked to people who the sibling dynamics make it really hard, right? And then you hear messaging, well, if you homeschool, the siblings will have great relationships. Maybe, maybe not. I definitely think that in our situation and many that I've seen, I do think that it's developed a really close bond, but I can't say that's this, like, I'm not going to argue with somebody when I can see they're struggling with sibling dynamics, right? Like things are real for people. So I feel like there's so many different ways to look at capacity. But when you said the different ages, like, yes, because so right now I'm spending quite a bit of time during the week with like 1 or 2 of my little grandgirls who are just toddlers. And that is such a natural age for me. Like I could read picture books and listen to children's music and push strollers and it's not easy. You're also chasing kids and you're trying to figure out how to go to the bathroom if you're out. Like I don't mean it's an easy stage, but it's a stage that more than infancy for me, and then more as kids get older. I think I just love that sort of like 18 months to 7. Like I could spend a lot of time with kids that age, but a lot of people do not share my interest in that, which is totally fine. And then Ashley, you mentioned high school. That was definitely a big challenge for me. Those years, sometimes even now, I'm like, okay, I made it through. I did it. Not just homeschooling, but parenting. There was so many pieces to think about. And I've heard other people say the opposite, though. They find younger kids really exhausting, and the teen years were great for them. And I'm sure you've both heard me say that now that my kids are like entered into adulthood, I'm doing a whole other level of learning. So it's just like, what's our capacity also during those different life stages? And I think, I don't know, I feel like maybe we'll be skipping around and maybe that's fine. So I'm kind of skipping from little kid here to high school, but just to say something about that high school age, like, I think I pictured, there was some beautiful, beautiful curricula that I did picture early on for high school. I was like, oh, this would be so interesting to learn about, and this would be so cool. And we did do a bit of that, especially my youngest really wanted, she saw some of this beautiful stuff that friends were doing, and we did tap into some of that. And it was actually a really good fit. But whether it was those resources that she saw, or whether it was my older kids choosing some Like what I didn't think we would do was provincial credits. Like I was not homeschooling to do like a standard, I don't know what, Ontario geography or whatever. That wasn't what I was picturing we would be doing. But we did do some of that. And again, that was a much cheaper option. If we're thinking about accessibility, that was a much cheaper option. And I think by the time that we got to those high school years, first of all, those actually worked. They were taking them for the purpose of having a prerequisite. They weren't taking them because they were dying to see what our province had to say about math when you're 17. Like that wasn't, no one was drawn to that really. It was the idea that it was kind of like the what's that, means to an end, I guess is the saying I'm looking for. And that was just going to be much more acceptable to universities and colleges than trying to push forward the idea of a homeschool curriculum, but it was also a lot cheaper. Mm-hmm. And so what I found the most important was not actually the particular thing that we were doing, whether that was curriculum, a course, or no structure at all. It was that partnership with them. So that even if we were taking what I consider to be kind of a drab prerequisite to, apply to college, we'd had so many years together that we could, if there was something being asked that was just super boring or just ridiculous, it was like we could talk about that. We could figure out how to make that as palatable as possible. So it was so different from when I was in high school, where there was like a curriculum and it felt like everybody against you trying to make your way through this curriculum. This was more like us partnered against the course and us enjoying, because there were lots of parts of the courses that were interesting, us being able to take the parts that were interesting and use those as a springboard for other things. But at first glance, they looked pretty boring compared to some of the fancy, like beautiful curricula out there. But anyway, I think that's where having years to build up that relationship just helps you go, well, we're partnering with this. So you're choosing this, but we're going to keep that wonder and that curiosity and that connection, even as we're doing these things that maybe wouldn't be like our first choice, whether that's financial or otherwise.
Yeah, and it's just making me think. I just want to say, as you're talking, Erin, I'm thinking about how, excuse me, all the things, like, I think the joy comes, or not, I mean, joy for sure, but just, I guess it's more enjoyable to do any of the things we're about to talk about when we're doing it with people that we enjoy spending time with, right? So whether it's siblings together or other like homeschool pals, and of course your parents or your caregivers. Like I just think back to my own childhood, or if I got to do certain high school assignments that I had to do, if one of my parents really connected with me and we got to do it together, even if it wasn't the most like enjoyable topic or whatever, you can make it more enjoyable when you're doing it with someone, right? And I think that's something that maybe you don't think about with homeschooling until you're in it and you realize that, oh, that's a big part of what it is. It's not the kids going off and doing it. I mean, sometimes the kids go off and do whatever it is on their own, but a lot of it is together. And I mean, we're always talking about how we're learning with our kids, right? And who doesn't enjoy that, right? So I think that's a big part of it.
Well, that makes me think like let's say you're stuck in traffic somewhere. You still find that it's not what you want. Nobody really was aiming to be stuck in traffic that day or whatever, or I don't know, any number of things. There's anything that kind of a wrench kind of gets thrown in your plans. And you just find a way it becomes part of your shared story as well. So you can find ways in the moment to enjoy it and connect over it. But all of those things become part of that context that you share together. And those are not things, so much of like the depth and the richness of who we are as individuals is not about what expensive programming we had. Mm-hmm. It's about the things that happened and the people we were with and the things that we noticed along the way. So yeah, I love that, Ashley. And I just wanted to say too, like, I'm so curious about, and I think you kind of already alluded to this, like, it must be so much easier for you to slide into this idea that this is just how we live. This is just what we do, because you would have that confidence of having homeschooled and unschooled, and knowing, new parents new to this are trying to figure out, how can I do this and my kids still turn out okay? But like, you turned out okay.
You hope.
Level of pressure there that's off, because from, like, not just experience, like, so I can say that because of my own kids, but like, you can say that from your own self. Like, that has to feel different, I think.
I would, if you were going to compare it to something, I would say, like Erin, I know you like to garden. I don't know if you grew up in a gardening family, but let's say if you grew up as a kid alongside of your parents out there gardening, it's kind of a way of life where maybe then in your adult life, you just automatically do it and you're not necessarily thinking about it and you just know how to make it work. It's like I have a lot of friends who do a lot of research on topics and things related to homeschooling that I'll be like, huh, I never even thought about going and looking that, where same thing is like, I don't have a green thumb. If I want to grow something, I still don't, but I should put in the time and effort to research it and figure out where to put that plant and what kind of dirt and what blah, blah, blah. But if you just grew up in a family that gardened, you're probably naturally going to have a backyard garden and you're just going to kind of know how to do it. So it's that. Whereas being a kid didn't necessarily make parenting, like I said, homeschool is kind of autopilot for me. Parenting isn't. That's a whole nother ball game. But yeah, that just like, yeah, if you had a garden or if you maybe you were in a family that I don't know, you had woodworking or whatever, was a musical family where it becomes second nature rather than something you're having to go learn.
Mm. Yeah, the musical thing makes me think of a friend of mine who, when she got married, when she and her husband got married, and she couldn't believe, so she would have she would have the radio on in the background, but if it wasn't, she would often sing, or she would often, and her husband had no, he just thought it was the weirdest thing that, she would want music on in the car, or that she would be singing, or she would whistle. And he's like, why? And she said it was that's just how, like, to your point, they were so musical. And I grew up in a family like that too. So for me, it's just completely normal to be whistling, to be singing. Again, if I'm doing a picture book with one of the little ones, I'll often, if it's one that goes with a song, I will be singing it. And I've been out and people are kind of looking at me and I'm like, right, not everybody, but for me, I don't even think about it. It's just connected to, so I love that point. It's just, yeah.
It just becomes part of your DNA.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of beliefs and customs, and it's like we don't necessarily think about some of the traditions we celebrate because we just have always done it. So yeah, it's just in that mold for me.
I love that. It makes me also think about, you had said something at the beginning, Anne, that reminded me of something, and I'm probably going to get it wrong. Excuse me, but it was around the idea, I think, of like people thinking potentially they have to have the answers, or like, how can I teach my child? Or because I do think this plays in a lot to how much money people feel they have to spend, and kind of whether they feel they need to compensate or overcompensate. And I think sometimes that's like learning stuff. So that might be like lessons or expensive curriculum, or things like forest schools or learning pods where maybe a group of parents are hiring a teacher or whatever. So there's kind of like that learning end of things. But I also think we can overcompensate. I would say I did this from the socialization standpoint, and also from like the kind of providing rich opportunities. So I do think I was I always thought pretty resourcefully, but definitely there were times that we did enjoy spending more money on things, whether it was like live theater or memberships or things like that. And sometimes that just felt very much of value to me, because as much as we're talking about like finding practical and inexpensive ways of doing things. I'm also not a person who, kind of like what you're talking about with the games, Anne, if something feels of value to me and it feels like it would be really just a really good thing for that particular child, I typically will find a way to make it happen. Like I don't mean to suggest that I'm out here not spending on money on stuff, because we definitely did. But I do wonder when I look at some things, especially on the social end of things, if there were moments where I was overcompensating, like we need to do this field trip because it's a chance for the kids to get out with other kids, or yeah, I don't know, just that kind of thing. And I was thinking about how I went on this walk last night, and it was just like a city park, but it kind of takes you along the ridge above the lake. And there were so many things that we came across that I knew about, like types of caterpillars and types of leaves. And but there were some that I didn't, that we kept coming across these little seed pods. And when we opened them up, there were these little tiny round seeds. And I can't honestly say that I'm sure what type of seed pods they were. And I got reflecting about the fact that I also kind of don't care in this moment, and that's fine. So getting away from that mindset that we need to have a teacher or a nature guide of some sort to tell us exactly what type of seed pod is along the path. And also, or we need to be able to research that and find it out. Like some of life is just noticing there seem to be these same kind of seed pods we keep coming across along the way, and looking around and being like, I can't quite figure out what that's connected to. Because sometimes we do feel really drawn, or our kids feel drawn to diving deeper to figure out what exactly is that. But other times it just is what it is. And so I think that that's also why somebody might say, oh, my kid, I should pay for forest school. Or we should make sure we go on some, Ashley, like you've talked about kind of the idea of more of a forest school co-op. And we had something kind of like that. We just basically rotated hiking places every week, but we didn't have like anybody there who we were paying or who had the expertise to tell us, oh, this is what you're seeing right now. So for me too, there's just some of that. I guess it's deschooling for those of us who have been to school, but for you, Anne, it's probably just the way things are.
Well, it's a funny thing about like when you talk about like going on outings or field trips. I remember there was one time we were going to a place with a friend of ours who homeschools, and she and I were talking about how and this is like there's a forestry center, interpretive center, all kinds of educational stuff around. She and I were talking about how we didn't count it as a school day. It's like in our homeschool, I didn't think of, because we've often talked about how homeschool and family life are so closely mingled. I didn't necessarily think about trips to those places as school. It's like we were talking before we got on here about, start of summer and people go out and do a lot of things. When families are doing their summer vacations and trips to here and there, they may not be thinking that's like a school trip. That's not a field trip. There's not learning. And so on so many things that I do, because like you were saying, yeah, I spend money on things. There's things where I invest and go, I think this is a great experience. I don't necessarily think this is a great school experience. It's like, to me, it's a family experience. And so when I think of all the things we did as a child, when I was a kid, it's like they were family experiences, and that was kind of how my mind logged them. So I guess I didn't chalk it up to a homeschool expense, because all families have things they do as experiences, so I don't necessarily, it can go in either bucket. It's just my own mind kind of thinks of it as something I'm doing just as a family thing, more so than, because when we go places, I don't usually be like, we need to read the signs, we need to do this, we need to interact. Like sometimes, like you're saying with the seed, it can just be. Whereas then in terms of, do you need a place with the instructor who's going to teach you? Do you need to learn what those seeds are? Like, no, sometimes you can just go enjoy, maybe by osmosis, you pick some stuff up, or maybe you do want to dig in. But in terms of like, I'm not saying I think of homeschool as being sustainable, is that you have all those moments for opportunities where you don't need somebody sitting there teaching it to you and going, this is school right in this moment. You just have a lot of opportunities for curiosity of like, I wonder what that is. And maybe I'll even check it out in a couple when it comes back up again, like you have opportunity for curiosity where you didn't have to pay to go get put in front of an expert to tell you what it is. But if you want to explore it, you can, that kind of thing.
Yeah, this is making me think. I keep thinking about deschooling as well, like you said, Erin. Like, I think that's what I was kind of thinking about at the beginning too, is that you really do have to shift your idea of what learning really looks like. And then you can just, well, you start seeing it all the time. So yeah, going back to kind of what you were both just talking about, it's making me think about like I have zero interest. Like I love how you said that, Erin, how the C pod can just be. It can and how you're saying like it's a family experience, right? Like it's not about, I mean, it depends. Everyone can do things differently, of course, but for me, I have no interest in looking something up or telling my kids something that, if they show no interest. I'm not like, oh, I really wish, right? I mean, sometimes, sure, if it's something I'm interested in, but then I just go off and learn about it on my own because I want to leave them the space to really dive in when something is of interest to them. So I don't know, that's what's kind of coming up for me as you guys are sharing. I'm thinking about how we talk a lot about following our kids' interests. And some kids are interested in learning about, all about seeds and nature. And some kids are really into that when they're little, and then they really are not interested in it anymore, or it goes the opposite way. One thing that I thought of as an example of like practical like learning that doesn't, that's free. We've spent a little bit of time learning about like local history because there's quite a bit where we live. But myself included, I mean, I'm probably the one who would have the most interest in it. Both my kids, have had moments where they might ask a few questions and they show a little bit of interest, but neither one of them have become super interested. And that's fine. Like and maybe they will or maybe they won't, but it's just trusting, I think, that they're interested in things already. So leaving space for them to dive into those areas. And then the other thing that keeps popping up is how people will say, like, I see little messages about like not turning everything into a lesson. And I think like when you first start homeschooling, right? And it comes from that pressure and just wanting to like give your kids all the opportunities and information. I understand where it comes from, but from my experience, it really puts kids off, right? Like if it's asking the kids all the questions and feeding them all the information, you can see it, right? Like you can see their curiosity kind of just you can see it in their body language and everything, unless they're genuinely interested, then awesome. But yeah, I don't know, that's just stuff that was kind of coming up for me while you guys were talking about it.
You just made me like, I sorry about started laughing in the middle because my dad used to say everything is a homeschool lesson, and it was just like we'd start groaning. We hated that phrase so much.
I mean, it could be, right? It could be.
No kid wants to hear that though. It's like
No.
I could have just enjoyed today. You didn't have to remind me. Yeah, I mean, I feel differently about it now, where I totally agree with him, but I don't voice it.
Yeah. Yeah, just notice it in your own mind and don't like push it on. No,
so many times he would say that, and we'd both just be like, "Oh, Dad."
which is funny because your dad probably went to school, so right, it's like
Yeah,
he was a teacher, yeah, exactly. So that's kind of funny, but it's still it's like it wore off enough that it was still normal for you. You could kind of like that you even noticed that, right? It's like and Ashley, like I think you said something about leaving space, and that kind of makes me think about how I think that has a lot to do, probably not even just within homeschooling, but for all of us in our life. I think there's like a fear of leaving space, a fear of not having something planned or not having something to do. But maybe especially with homeschooling. And then, so it's like, how many things can we sign up for? Or I better buy this resource to have this on hand or whatever. And I think that becomes kind of it almost becomes a habit of needing to fill all those gaps. And I totally get that. Like, if you were bringing your kids out of school and making a decision to homeschool, you would be like, okay, so here we are. what what do we do now? And so, and I've read a lot of articles about this, that even though you'll probably move away from what you originally purchased, that for a lot of families, if they're just coming out of school, it sometimes does make sense. It's kind of like, you look back at it, everybody I think looks back at the money they spent, but it's almost like an inevitability that people will purchase some stuff and look back on it and go, oh, we didn't need that, or we didn't use it, or we didn't enjoy it, or whatever. But it's pretty hard not to do that, I think, coming out from a system where your time is fully planned, right? There's a program in place for everything. But I do think that leads to money spending, that fear of open time. And then what was the other thing? I was thinking about it at the same time. Oh, hopefully it'll come back to me. Oh no, I do know what it was. It was, just how maybe people feel pressure. I definitely felt some of this. If you have neighbors or friends or extended family, or maybe even a spouse who's feeling like why would your kids not be in school? Or, how are you going to offer them the kinds of things that school would be able to offer them? Even if you yourself it might not be the route you would go down to spend quite a bit of money or sign up for a lot of things. I think it helps people to outwardly show that they're doing things. Like, if you can say, oh yeah, we have, drama classes on Tuesday, and we go to forest school on Thursday, and we are signed up for 2 different sports, and we just bought this beautiful literature curriculum. Like, that helps kind of, and it literally does help external people settle down. I can say that from experience, that if you kind of put out those more, I don't know, traditional, for lack of mainstream, maybe, examples of what you're doing, people are like, oh, okay, they have a membership here. That's good. Right? They must be learning some science because they have a membership to the science museum. Or, oh, they're taking them to live theater, or they've just bought all these beautiful books, so it must be okay. So I think there's a piece of that, probably a pretty big piece of that for some people.
Yeah, I think it provides adults mostly with a lot of comfort and reassurance. And it's looking at, and I mean, I think about the questions that the kids are asked, like often the first one with, if you're just meeting someone, it's what grade are you in? It's all about what are you doing, right? Like what we hear a lot is, yeah, what school do you go to, or what grade are you in? What's your favorite subject in school? All questions that are not applicable to my kids. What sports are you in? And then if my kids don't have, like, well, we homeschool and we're not signed up for any sports, the adults are kind of like, like don't even know where to go next, right? Like, well, I guess I can't talk to you about anything. So yeah, so I've started to actually, at times, if I think ahead, and I know that, they might be asked those questions, I'll take a few minutes to be like, what have we been doing lately? And what are we really interested in? Because then my kids have opportunities to engage in conversations with other people where even they can just actually converse about something. But it's interesting because it does seem to be like there's a comfort for other adults when kids are doing things, I mean, of course they're doing things, but yeah, it's just so narrow minded and like narrowed down to just a few things. And then if they don't do those things, they're like, well, then what could you be doing with your time? That doesn't seem like that would be okay. But again, it comes back to that whole, like, yeah, having a different idea of what living and learning can look like, really. So yeah, I do a lot of explaining in those situations. Sometimes, other times I just, whatever.
We don't get that a whole lot, but we just had that the other day. Was it a week or two ago? We were at the grocery store, because most people who know me are not gonna pester me about much, and I don't have to worry about a lot of family oversight. But there was a man at the grocery store that we were helping to get something off the shelf. And so he started chit-chatting. And when he heard my son was homeschooled, he turned to him and he was like, well, what are you studying right now? It's like, you could just see like son's face was like, I have no idea how to answer this. And luckily, Aaron,
Like,
it was when we were doing the shipwrecks and stuff. Because we were
Oh,
both sort of standing there going, they went, ooh, shipwrecks. We're doing
yeah.
shipwrecks. I mean, it was like a one day he read a couple books thing, right? But we were like, yes, we have an answer.
oh my gosh. It's so funny because like I know how many different things, like how immersed he is in different things, but it's like you get that question. And the question is almost, you're almost learning so many things that you can't answer the question.
Like, what they're looking for is like, you're
Yeah.
studying X in science and X in math. It is like, no, it's whatever pops up right now. So let me see what was most recent.
Yeah.
And we had one.
That was
Especially
good.
right now, the biggest game would probably be board games. And it's like, that's not going to be an acceptable answer, you know?
No, I know it's always those moments when you're kind of caught. But like you, Ashley, like if I can think of a few things ahead of time, that can help for sure.
Well, and it is funny because it does take me a few minutes because even though I'm like, but I think it's because it's not separate from our life, like what we've been talking about, right? Like the way a lot of more mainstream families live, I guess, is that it is separate, right? Like you have home life and family life and you have school. And often it's, for whatever reason, asking about school stuff or extracurricular activities, like structured stuff. Um, and yeah, for us, I find it's just so much more intertwined that it just takes a few more minutes to think about, okay, what is it they're looking for? Oh, okay, we did, we read a book about this recently, or we talked about this and we learned a little bit about this, but it's not like a separate thing that it's easy to just, yeah. So it's probably one of those things that if you're not doing it, people are probably like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
I don't understand, but yeah,
Yeah,
homeschool people will get it.
for sure. And I'm really glad, Ashley, that you brought up the sports thing because I think um, that's another piece that, again, it's kind of back to that parenting idea. It's not even just about homeschooling, it's about parenting. But if you are homeschooling and your finances are possibly a little bit less flexible than they would be if you weren't. And part of it sometimes is just choice that you don't want to be out too many nights a week or whatever as well. But that's another big one too, is how many sports, or are you taking music lessons? Or, I mean, we've talked about some of these things before. The value like just outside of home education, the value that people put on kids just taking a lot of stuff. And a lot of those things have become like, so even if I compare it to what those same activities were when I was a kid, the prices have increased. Things have just become more competitive, more elite, and people seem to feel their kids need to do more, almost like creating this well-rounded, child or whatever. And some kids really do thrive with a lot of external activities. So I don't think any of this is ever to like put down any particular choice, but yeah, if an adult kind of talking to your child can't relate to them on the grade level thing, then yeah, they go to like, or for summer. I mean, this is an interesting, we're talking about this. And you just told me, is it summer solstice today?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, that's what
It
is according
is.
to my half sister. I hadn't looked it up either.
I was thinking it was tomorrow. So there you go. Thank
I
you.
lost track of what day it was.
Thank you. But kind of coming into this season, even for summer holidays, I feel like, what camps are kids doing, or are you going on a holiday? Because to me, when I'm thinking about this, it's not even just about like curriculum or lessons or whatever. It's what are we able to offer our children even on that? Like we live in a world that really values travel, values elite sports, elite music, travel, experiences. And so it's kind of like, how are we connecting with our kids in a way and fostering their connection to the world in a way that feels rich and abundant, but it doesn't mean we can't go on a fancy trip, but it doesn't mean that we need to, right? I think that's the piece that I often keep coming back to. So I wonder if we could just throw some practical ideas around.
Yeah. Because I think one thing when we were talking about like capacity and resourcefulness, you've got to be willing to dig. Have your eyes open, because like I'm not really online, but I am in some of the local Facebook stuff, just seeing what there is. It's like our library is rich. There's so much programming also through there. And it's certainly not just our library. It's like if you look at your library, they may have free passes. Like that's where we manage to do a lot of our trips is free passes from our library. Also, there are some local programs, like there's a citizen science program where through them then you get free access to places. We have a music organization here that is also free to kids to come join and learn an instrument, and they get partnered with somebody local because it's kind of a music rich area. So it just requires you to kind of dig in and keep your ears open. Just get plugged into like the local homeschool group will pop up stuff to share. The library used to do before COVID. It was like every spring they would do a big thing of here's anybody in the community who has something to offer. Come spend an evening and go booth to booth. So it's just a matter of kind of looking sometimes, because yes, even like we have friends who found out they could be part of the high school swim team. So sometimes you can partner with a public school and get in on some of the sports, or find ways to get passes into things for free through the community. So it's not necessarily that you have to spend the money or you have to not go. Sometimes there are available ways in the community to get in there without having to spend the money yourself for some of those things.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about libraries because I think we realize, right, like they're just so valuable and they offer so much more than, what you think at first, even just a quiet, welcoming, accepting space often. So I just want to touch on that because I made a note too. I mean, they have more than just books, right? So I think a lot of people know that now. Um, one of our local libraries has, they put together like these adventure kits, which when I saw those, I was like, oh my gosh, right? And like I think one's for birding. I don't know, they had different ones. Instruments, I know, but then our really local library has a maker space. And I don't know how many libraries have the maker spaces, but and we have not tapped into ours because my kids just don't have the interest at this point. But the maker space at our library has like a 3D printer, like a button maker. I think that's a common one in maker spaces, but just tools and resources that would often cost a lot of money. And you can just go in and use them. And there's usually someone there that can help show you how to use the equipment. And that's just endless opportunities to try out stuff. Even if you just want to try it out at first before maybe making a purchase of a certain tool or equipment. So libraries and maker spaces and things like that. There was something else I wanted to make sure I mentioned. I wanted to give the example of like kind of taking advantage of everyday things that kind of come up. So it's not to say money's not spent. Like, so for my son's birthday, maybe probably about 2 or 3 years ago now, we bought him a fish tank, which I had shared about. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast or not. So we did spend money, but it was his birthday, so we were going to be getting him a gift anyway. And this was going to be his birthday gift, his first fish tank, and he was really interested in it. And it was really cool for me to see how there was just so much learning and he was so interested in it. And when you can take a moment to think like all the science and the animal science and just understanding how the tank works, like the filter system and all the maintenance and stuff, and going to the pet store and learning about like which fish can go with what other fish. And yeah, there's just so much there when you really it became a whole thing for us, which I thought was really cool. But it was just, I mean, lots of families might get a fish tank, right? Like it wasn't, we didn't get it for the purpose of learning, I guess. And then we did the same thing before we got our pet cat. We were a dog family before, so we knew what it was like to have a dog. And my son actually loves learning about different dog breeds. That's been an interest of his for years now. And then we learned a lot about cat behavior before we decided as a family to get a cat. And that did kind of stem from like my youngest was nervous about having a cat, just thinking, oh, cats scratch, and cats seem, a little bit more like they keep to themselves, whereas a dog wants the belly rubs and stuff. So we learned a lot about, what is it like to be a cat and different cat behavior. And as you can imagine, like online, there's just so many resources. So we dove right into, and one kid was interested in learning a whole bunch about it and still talks about it, and another kid had very little interest, so that was fine. And we didn't have to do that. I mean, we could have just got the cat and learned a little bit through experience even, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my one kiddo was just really interested and felt a lot better having learned. Like I remember specifically, we would look up what it means. Like, so for a dog, because that was our comparison, that was our experience. When a dog's tail is wagging, that's an indication that the dog's feeling comfortable and happy. But with a cat's tail position, it means different things. And yeah, he'll still mention, he'll be like, oh, I think maybe she's feeling really nervous right now, or oh, she seems really fine. Or, when a cattail is moving a lot, it actually might mean that they're feeling overstimulated and needs to play, doesn't want to like cuddle and be pet or whatever. So I like thinking about how just every day, not every day, but like just normal life situations kind of come up, and they can they don't have to, but they can become like there's a lot of learning there. And I think going back to what we were saying earlier too, like we do it together, so it's enjoyable, right? And we just do it for as long as we're interested in, and then we stop. Like I didn't put anything together. We just, lots of times it's like Googling the questions, finding the video, watching the video together, and then waiting to see if, more questions arise. And if so, we continue. And if not, then we're done. And then there's space for whatever comes next. So I've got a list of practical things, but I just want to make sure that I shared that one because those are two pretty big ones, I think, for us that came up.
Yeah, weaving in the average day-to-day stuff, that's such a part of what I think of when I think of like sustainable. Because like Aaron and I had a conversation one time about the idea of game schooling and how like you put games out there as specifically learning tools. And that's never appealed. It's not like we're talking about like sneaking in learning. Sneaking and learning with these games is like, that's never been what I've tried to do. But then when we started playing games, we suddenly realized we were getting so many of the benefits of things we'd previously been getting through like heat enjoyed unit studies and things like that, that we just sort of shelved everything else we were doing, and our days are filled with games. So it's like if you have something in your life that's like a hobby or an interest or something new coming in, it's such a great time to just let it weave in naturally if it's a hit. Like we've gotten terrariums or fish tanks, either which way, from the thrift store even, and we used to never have one empty. It's just this constant changing out of whether we found some cool bug or the toad in the yard that we wanted to look at for a couple days, or a turtle. It's like there are such great ways of just all of a sudden that animal is so interesting and you can actually observe it and have a few moments. So it's just like grabbing those little tidbits that keep popping up as you go.
Well, and what I like about that, like, so you've both given examples of different ways you can do the same thing. So like, Anne, you're talking about like you can often pick aquariums up or terrariums from a thrift store and work with what you're naturally finding. And so there's like that piece of it. And then Ashley, you're talking about making an investment because it, like what we talked about, we're not going to like not spend money if it's something that makes sense for your family. So whether that's a cat or whether that's going to the store and buying an aquarium, but there's a similarity there in that, there's so much that you're learning and you're doing together. The cat and dog thing's so funny, Ashley, because I remember talking to my kids about that with a dog's tail moving and a cat's tail moving mean opposite things. And the same thing with the throat noises they make. So a cat, the throat noise is like content. A dog, not so much. They're growling or whatever. So it's funny, just even these little conversation points that come up without even thinking about it being learning or like anything to do with that. It's just stuff that anybody would notice, and it kind of comes up in conversation. What was I going to say? It had to do with oh, I know what it was, actually. It was you talking about so going and getting the aquarium, and that being something that you guys wanted to do. And I would say that similarly for something like a location that we wanted to visit. If it felt like the timing was really good and we weren't going to get that timing combination of timing back, or if it was something that was a really keen interest for somebody, then yeah, it has made sense at times. Just say, let's invest the money in this, that the timing is good. And just to contrast that to what Anne had said, what we've also done a lot of, our library also has free passes to local things. And it's funny if we think about like what are the different qualities that kids are developing through their family life with us or their learning life with us, because there's an example, those two examples to me. So one example would be, okay, we might want to go to this museum, but we're waiting for the free pass, or we might want to go to this location or this gallery or whatever. And so it just creates a normalcy of sometimes we wait for stuff. We really want to do that in order to either we need to do it from affordability perspective, or we're choosing to do it. We're going to wait this out a little bit until the pass becomes available. So that right there is just like a skill that I feel like people say you need to go to school to learn, like kind of deferring that impulse that you can't have your way all the time. But that's just a natural way. Not only are you getting to go to the museum, you're kind of developing that normalcy that sometimes we wait for things. But the flip of that, which is just as valid, is times when I have seen something come up and we don't want to wait because the timing would work really well for a particular child. And so, yeah, we want to feel like we want to be able to go and do that. And so at the same time, that's another type of lesson. It's like sometimes somebody's interest and timing is of value so much that we're going to invest in that. And so that might mean a lesson to ourselves that sometimes it's worth investing in ourselves. And then other times there are things we choose to wait for. That was a whole lot. I don't know if it made sense, but I'm just thinking about how through natural life, our kids are accessing both of those messages, right? Sometimes we're generous to people or ourselves with that timing and money. And other times it's like, yeah, we're going to wait and see when this pass loops around, or we're going to wait and see if we can find a good deal on an aquarium or whatever. And Ashley, I've got to find it. There's a blog post by a woman. I think it's something like Wildflowers. Anyway, her journey with their aquarium. You want to talk about learning. I've always loved it. So I'll see if I can find it. But anyway.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, things come up, and when one of the caregivers in the family also can find interest in learning about it, that's when it really goes well. So it's not about, because I think sometimes our kids get interested in things and we're just not interested in it at all, and we can still support them, but maybe that's just not the thing that you connect on the most. I found it interesting to, dive into the fish tank stuff and learn all about that. And to a point. And then I got to a point where I was really over it. and he was kind of over it too. So that kind of worked out, but that might not have been the way it was. Yeah, and then some things are more ongoing. Like we still find it really interesting to learn about the cat, not as frequently and more through experience, but we'll still look things up sometimes together. But I think like going back to like doing it together is when it can get like really rich. But just when you were talking there, Erin, I was thinking about, well, I'll just add what I was, the other skills that I feel happen a lot when we do these things with our kids, and so much of it is through conversations together, but also like decision-making skills, problem-solving skills. We talk about the problem-solving skills a lot right now, because my goodness, do problems arise all on their own frequently. And so we talk a lot about, and then I think about teamwork too, right? So when you really start pulling it all apart, you see how there's all these opportunities on a day-to-day basis where these skills are being built just naturally through whatever it is that we're doing. But it's like doing it together. And I think it's just helpful for parents to realize like that's really valuable. Like that, those are skills that we want our kids to learn. And it's not about them, figuring it out right away, but recognizing that that's something that will take time. And over the years, they're developing those skills. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's one of the practical things too that we have as a resource that maybe we don't always think of is our time. We have that time where they're around to see the regular things. Like here in a bit, we'll be going off to work. He gets to see what work looks like. He gets to value the effort that goes into work. He gets to see me talk about work and clients and balance when there's issues or when there's good things, or weighing how valuable a chunk of time is, or going to the store afterwards and budgeting. And the other day I was having trouble reading my own handwriting, so he was helping me pay bills and balance the checkbook. So it's like we have the time where they're just right there to learn so many life skills beside us.
Mm-hmm.
And I find they love that. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Erin. I was just going to say, I find that that's what, like, we often realize that teenagers crave that, right? Like the real life practical stuff. Like they often, not all of them, but some of them are, motivated to go get a part-time job because they want to get into the real world. But I've noticed with my two, one a little bit more so than the other, but really both of them, they're very interested in the everyday real world stuff that we're dealing with. And lots of times we can find it boring stuff, but if we can, like you said, and like find that time and slow down and take the time to let them in, sometimes a lot, sometimes just a little bit. I mean, it can look all different sorts of ways. I find my kids have been really interested in that type of stuff. Like, I'll just say one more thing. We've talked about kids markets on here before, which I love. I think kids markets are just so cool and so fun. And my kids have both participated in kids markets, but I want to say altogether, maybe four, maybe only three. Like they don't happen all that often for us. So they're great experiences, but yeah, they're minimal, I guess, for us. So letting them think about money and just I don't know, I'm kind of referring to them as just like real world, everyday adulthood type stuff, right? They get access to that a little bit more and they don't have to wait till they're older. And I think lots of times you feel like you have to craft these experiences, and sometimes that's fun. Like we recently talked about coming up with this activity that I saw another homeschool family do, where the kid designs their own food truck and they have to come up with the menu and they have to price out what it would cost to buy the food, and kind of create their own little food truck business. And there's so much, we just wanted to do it because it was fun. But I just don't think that like it's okay if you don't do those things. You can let them in on the everyday things and they can gain those skills in a way that's really practical and that a lot of them enjoy.
Yeah, I was actually 15, I think, when I don't remember exactly how it got started, but that's when my dad handed me the checkbook and said I could take care of the family finances. So I paid the bills every month and I balanced the checkbook from there on out. And I enjoyed it. Like you're saying, I liked that feeling and I was very responsible. I've always been very responsible since then, with my money and doing the bills. So like being offered that um may have helped set that stage, or
Mhm.
something I really wanted to do. And I was thinking, Erin, I had forgotten when you were talking about like the skill of sort of the patience and picking and choosing. Maybe we think it's like later on in life, if we're choosing to go out to dinner, it may be from 29 days out of the month, we're going, well, let's eat at home because it's cheaper. But then maybe every now and then there's that special occasion where it's like, we're gonna go out to the good restaurant. Like Ashley, I know you guys have just enjoyed doing like the fancy dinner experience. So it's that same sort of thing of, you might budget and catch all the sales at the grocery store all month long, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, special occasion, we're gonna go out and treat ourselves tonight. So it's learning to find that balance.
Mm-hmm. And that piece around too, like what spontaneity versus planning, and that there's joy in both, right? Like sometimes it's fun to plan towards something and either plan for it time wise, save money, whatever, and feel like, okay, we've saved for this and now we're going to eat at that restaurant, or we're going to buy this, whatever. And then there's also value in leaving enough space, whether that's budget, if it's possible, or time where we go, let's just go here tonight. Let's just go grab an ice cream. Let's go for dinner. because I think, again, when we're talking about, like, so often I've seen things worded like homeschooling on a shoestring budget, or like, I know I've read articles and stuff like that before, and it, or not even homeschooling, people talk about living in a really resourceful way. There are whole movements around that. And I tend to identify with a lot of those pieces. But at the same time, it's like, we don't want to be living feeling a sense of scarcity all the time either, right? So it's like, how do we live real lives, but that are both simple but also can feel abundant? And so I feel like that combination of yeah, planning, but also leaving that space where we can feel spontaneous about something, but then also sometimes that spontaneity, finding joy in things that other people, that maybe, it's not typically seen as an abundant thing. And I think, just even in our conversations outside of this one, we see lots of that, right? Getting, Anne, you've done so many pieces about like the moon and that kind of thing. And it's like looking forward to things that aren't necessarily what everybody else is looking forward to, and that's okay. So I can't remember if it was the blog post I referred to at the beginning or not, but there is a blog post I've written somewhere where I talk about putting some stuff on the calendar so that the calendar doesn't look empty. And so my idea of a calendar used to be more like you would put stuff on the calendar that you needed to remember to almost like fulfill somebody else's expectations, right? So if there was like, I don't know, something planned that you needed to be at, whether that was work, whether that was like a family celebration or something like that, that's the stuff that would go on the calendar. But I think another way of thinking about this, I think we feel abundant if we were to take a calendar. For me, it's more in my head, but I'm just imagining for other people. And when the kids were younger, I would put it more specifically on a physical calendar, but that could be strawberry moon. And, do we want to have strawberry Sundays the night of the strawberry moon? Because for some kids, that would be really fun. For other kids, it's enough to get out and look at the moon. Like, obviously, we all know our own selves and our own kids. But those are things that are not, they cost nothing. They cost nothing, but we can celebrate those things. So that was something that I thought a lot about, was like, what are we already going to be doing that we can add a little special piece to? Or, just add that little bit of extra awe, whether we're noticing it in our child or whether we're finding it for ourselves, right?
Yeah, one way that, so, in the virtual kitchen table community monthly newsletter, they will often include, or I know I've seen it there before, but like, or what do you call them? Like national days, like ice cream day, or I mean, there's so many. So we don't do this year round, but if I notice that the kids are starting to feel a little blah, or they just maybe even need something to like look forward to, we will, yeah, it's kind of in my head, but I find like for those special days, certain things, like I'll forget about it. So we'll like put it up on the calendar. And I mean, lots of times we put it on the calendar and we don't look at the calendar, it passes and we forget, but it's not a big deal. But if it's a slower week and the kids are just feeling like maybe a bit down and they need like something to look forward to or a little pick me up, such an easy, simple way to be like, oh, it's read aloud day, or it's so funny to even just look up all the different days and then pick which ones, like donut day, that they get really excited about. To just, you can make it a big thing or you can forget about it and it's fine. And then we also do the same with like seasonal things, because I'm not a huge planner. And I like to just kind of leave space because we don't know how much energy everybody will have. So I don't like to plan too much so that we can really stay open and flexible. So kind of, and maybe I've talked about this before, so I'll keep it short, but I kind of look at it like quarterly, sometimes monthly, and it's usually my youngest who wants to sit down with me with paper and pencil and be like, okay, what do we want to do this spring? Or what do we want to do this summer? Or sometimes it's looking at what did we do this past season, and then we write it all down and we go, oh, we actually did a lot. And that can just be like, right now it's strawberry picking season. So that would that would cost a bit of money. But, we buy our strawberries anyway. We're going to get strawberries. So we could go out and pick our own strawberries as an experience. And there was actually a stretch of years there where I took the kids every year to go strawberry picking. But now that they're older, sometimes, some years they want to, sometimes they don't. So I don't get stuck in it, but it's just nice to kind of look at the seasonal things that come up as well. But I noticed that in your blog post too, Erin. So I'm glad you brought that up about, taking a look and plopping those things in the calendar, or you just decide to go check out a new ice cream spot
Mm-hmm.
and add a playground trip along the way. Like we've done a lot of that when they were younger.
Well, that's that kind of like stacking one thing with another,
Yeah.
or at least the option, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes like 2 things are too much, or 3 things are. I have a tendency to try to do a lot of. I'm like, well, we're here already. Let's do this, and it's just too much, and I get that. But having that thought in your mind, right? Like, oh, and even if it's something practical you're doing, oh, we need to go to this hardware store. I noticed a different playground that I think we haven't checked out before. So it's just keeping that, like, I don't know, Anne, I think you made reference to it, like just keeping your ears open, keeping your eyes open, keeping open to, a new playground, a new stretch of shoreline to skip stones. And like anytime we do anything like that, it's a little bit new. I've been noticing there's a town kind of close to us. And I realized the other day, I was at a park doing some work, and their garbage can was painted like a ladybug. And then I went to another one and it had like birds on it, like quite nicely painted. And then yesterday there's one with trilliums, which is like our Ontario as our provincial flower. And I'm like, oh, these parks are painting all, like in this particular town, they paint all their garbage cans. And so just even keeping, some of it's just mindset. It's not even about the playground there, although it could be, or the walking trail, but it's like, it's almost like a fun little ongoing scavenger hunt with no real organization. It's just like, oh, we're here. That's interesting. Remember they had, seagulls painted on there. So it's just that openness of like noticing things and taking an interest in some of the different, because I think there's a lot of creativity that happens. Like Ashley, you mentioned the library, and we're similar. Our main library has an incredible maker space. I went in there the other day to get something, and as always, I popped down to the kids area, and I was just like, even since my kids were young, I was blown away. Like you could it's incredible. But I think a lot of people don't even know that. I think a lot of people don't even know how incredible it is there. And so it's just becoming aware, right? And keeping your eyes open. But no, what I was going to say is I think that there are a lot of people with creative ideas, like even that garbage can thing, like somebody at the town level had that idea. But how many people notice it? Yeah. So there's just, I don't know. Anne, you and I have talked about this too, like things that libraries are putting on, or maybe like a park system is putting on. Like we would call them provincial parks here, but state parks for you guys. And there's like a level of creativity that I'm sure they're hoping somebody will want to enjoy and take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. And I think one important thing too is just always, like Ashley was kind of talking about, leaving room for possibility. Because when we go to the state parks, it's not just about the program, it's also about the relationships we've developed with the rangers that can then lead to so many more parts and pieces. We've got far more depth from getting to know folks that we see regularly than just dropping in on a random program. And actually, like how you're talking about getting into the cat thing or the fish thing or whatever else, like I know, I keep mentioning like the games thing. I've been surprised by where it can go if you just kind of let it go. Because like finding games was initially my thing. I'd found a YouTube channel that I would watch the reviews of, and I didn't realize quite how much she was tuning into this. And it's not like we're not YouTube heavy to begin with. But to the point of like, I remember one night I just started laughing because, I was washing dishes. In the background, he's pretending to be them. So he has like my old camcorder set up, and he's reviewing the game. Well, in order to do that, you have to describe the game. You have to say how it's played. And so I started laughing out. Someone was like, you realize this is kind of like an oral report? It was like the skill we weren't trying to work on here, but like you have to know it. And so I was so impressed by how thoroughly he knew it. And at this point, I think we have like 130 some games. He has learned this many, like the mental flexibility to learn so many different things and to internalize it. And I don't know how many he's done these little reviews for. And I was like, wow, like he understands how to put his thoughts together and in order and explain something to somebody else. So it's like if you leave room for the extra bits and possibilities, then all of a sudden you go, wow, they were learning things that I wasn't even thinking about. Like my brain wasn't going there. I wasn't anticipating it. And I didn't have to do a thing. It just naturally flowed out. So like you were saying, Ashley, if you kind of leave the room for interest, maybe not everybody's going to have it, but just let them do what they want with it and run with it, then you're not having to put those things out there in front of them, and it just happens, and it's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why, I mean, I wasn't a huge planner to begin with, but I definitely would have planned more at the beginning. But just seeing that things just happened, I was like, well, if I plan, if I take all, put all the effort into plan all these things, we're not going to do probably more than half of it because other things come up that they're more interested in. And it just makes sense to go that path instead, right? So I have a couple examples that came up. I don't even know which one to start because I think they both kind of like go along with what we're talking about. But one thing that I had thought about before we talked today was how like kids collections. I know some kids are bigger collectors than others, but how collections can be a really kind of like rich learning experience because, well, one, you're going off of your kids' interest because it's something that they've been collecting. But I'm going to use our Pokemon card collection as an example. Even though, I mean, there is investment there and there's other collections like we have. Or just think about like nature collections. You don't have to go out and spend lots of money if you want to go collect, all the fancy rocks that you find or pine cones or whatever. But Pokemon has been, I mean, we're not really in our Pokemon phase too much right now, although it still lingers through. But over the years, like we've got a serious Pokemon card collection here. And it's been really fun well, what made me think about it, Anne, was when you were talking about how like you go to the state parks and you get these connections and you meet these different people. So for us, our experience has been going to trading card shops, which is never a place I would have thought of. So Aaron also going off of like just taking time to like notice things just pop up. I never could have planned that would be something that we would do. But now I'm like, ooh, a new trading card shop that we haven't seen before, that we haven't checked out, or it's a new shop or whatever. And yeah, that can be a little outing that we do. Maybe we go get ice cream and then we go to the trading card shop. And lots of times when we go, like we don't spend a lot of money. You can easily spend a lot of money there, but we often are not. We're going in, the kids might have some of their pocket money and they might buy like individual cards, but it's really cool seeing, like it's a great opportunity for them to have conversations with other people who are super knowledgeable and interested in all of that stuff. And my one kid in particular has gotten really interested in using this app where they can like evaluate their cards. So they've kind of grown out of like they don't watch the Pokemon show anymore. They're not looking at the books too much anymore. But there's this other whole thing where it's still, we have this Pokemon card collection, and then there's a lot of interest to see how much are they worth. They've gone to Pokemon card trading nights where the trading card shop invites Pokemon card collectors to come and do trades for a couple of hours. I don't know, just so many neat opportunities that have come up through that over the years too, which is really nice. And then the other example I'll just give really quickly that you both know about, that again is just spontaneously kind of came up that I haven't even really thought a whole lot about, but I know it's a really cool thing that's happening. But my youngest is doing the like movie reviews or the book reviews for like they're putting it together for our community newsletter. And that just happened because we got into, I don't even know, it was probably a few years ago now, where once in a while it was kind of like after you watch a movie together and you ask your kids like, oh, what did you think? we got into like, how many stars would you give it? And we talked a little bit about how there's actual like professional writers out there who write book reviews and movie reviews. And they just have fun doing it. And it's just neat to see where that goes. Um, and it's like kind of what you were talking about, Anne, like all of a sudden we're doing all this writing and we're doing, we're looking up, like we're pulling out the dictionary and the thesaurus and we're like looking up like we're always using the same word. What are some other, or we're reading other reviews that other people do on movies and books. So yeah, but like, again, I never could have planned that. Like, it's just the opportunities come up, the interest has been there with one, and he might be over it before long, or it could be something like the Pokemon card collection that just keeps popping up and turns into like one thing after the next. So yeah, just a couple
We
other
were
examples.
working on our newsletter stuff yesterday, so it was the same way. And when we've done website stuff too, it's like, yeah, there's so much more that goes on with it. Suddenly you have typing practice and you're talking about spelling and, well, let's punctuate this and clean up the grammar, or how does the website work? How do I format it? How do I create this block? Doing the images and editing that. And like, there's so many parts and pieces. Because yeah, yesterday we were like staging photos and talking about lighting and rearranging things, and then having to formulate opinions or summarize something. And no matter how much we summarize, we always take up a full page. I don't know how it happens. I can't get short enough. So I'm sorry. We've done another page in the newsletter, but like there's so many little nuanced parts to it that go into it. And then at the end, you have that sense of satisfaction of like, look what we created, and it all comes together. But there's so many elements that go into it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and those are like the trading shop is such an example of how I think when their kids are maybe coming out of school, or you choose to homeschool from the beginning, and you think you have to, I certainly did a lot of this, create a substitute for school, like not even just academically. We always kind of flowed naturally that way, but like socially and interest wise. And like that trading shop is a perfect example. And you've shared so many in the past with like the history events and the birding and that kind of thing, where it can be more interest based. And a lot of that stuff, like I feel like there's a market around kids, right? So if you're looking for like kids lessons, or even like a homeschool, it depends. Sometimes homeschool families will pull together and do more of a co-op type thing, but other times I think more and more there's almost a contracting out to like a theater company or a pod teacher or whatever. But I find a lot of the interest groups or like little shops like you're talking about, they have nothing to do with like a homeschool community or even kids versus adults. It's just like, who might be interested in going into the trading shop, or who might be interested in coming to see the history events. And I found that I guess I always did it, but especially as my kids weren't like little kids anymore, like just connecting, either just us going, or sometimes connecting with another family that we knew and being like, I'm trying to think of some of the different things. Like, for example, there's a little village, I don't know, it's probably about a half hour from us, and they do like a Friday night auction. So like the old fashioned auction, and there's like, a chip truck and everything there. So like that as an outing for like 2 or 3 families, like everything doesn't have to be during the school day. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to school, so we need to find an alternate activity. It can be like, that can be just as good a field trip as meeting a bunch of people at an expensive art gallery or something like that. So I just found that when we connected with a couple of other people that were more interested in doing that kind of thing as well, that those were such interesting experiences, to go out to an auction, and I think being outside at night, all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to find somebody to go with me because I asked my son and he works late that night, but like there's this stargazing event kind of down at the pier, and I think they're maybe going to have some telescopes, but he has a telescope, so I was trying to see if I was trying to get in on that. But it's just having those sorts of things. And again, as you said, Anne, about keeping your eyes and ears open, like it's just looking like, what are the community events coming up? I would not consider myself a stargazing enthusiast. So it's not like I'm probably going to join the group, But I think we can leave room for that too, right? Like maybe kids do want to become a frequent part of a particular group, but maybe it's just a one-off to just kind of check out different things that are going on in the community. But I find a lot of people, and I think it's just because people are so busy.
Mhm.
So, but when you kind of leave that white space open, it's like, oh yeah, we could do a Saturday night stargazing event. Well, I may be there by myself, it's looking like, but you know what I mean? If you've got younger kids or, you know, even older kids, just being like, what's happening? It doesn't have to be an astronomy club for kids or lessons or whatever. It can just be like, what can you tap into?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and I feel like there's
oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I feel like there's a lot less pressure when you look at it that way too. It's often like, what can we sign up for? And my kids are very like, sign up? What? I don't want to commit to signing up. What do you know, this whole structured thing. So when it is like what you're saying, Aaron, like a one-off thing, it's like they get a taste of it, they get to check it out. They might be content with that, or they might be like, oh, I want more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, auction could be an expensive event, but we're not going for that reason. We're just
Right.
up for the fun of it. Right. So yeah. Sorry, Anne, go ahead.
And I was going to say, you had a good point where it's like, go adjacent. I would say think creatively and go adjacent. Because I remember similarly but different years ago when I had an outdoor job. I needed to get some good thermal clothes to keep me warm. And what I learned is go to the men's section. It's the same stuff, active bigger, so it has more material, and it's cheaper than buying the same thing in women's. So it's like sometimes when you're going for that targeted thing, and I've done that plenty of times too, where there might be something around the house I'm looking for. And I know what to call it. Like, for instance, here the other day, I was trying to figure out we needed a bigger gaming space, especially since we clutter our table. But if you look for something like board game table, oh my goodness, that's hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So you got to be kind of creative and go, what can I call this? It's not that. And I can't think of examples from the past, but I know I've done this many times where it's like, I need this one thing. But if I call it that, it's going to be this really expensive thing. But can I think of something that's very similar that can still fit the same purpose, you know? And suddenly you can find it at a fraction of the price. And yeah, it's like women's stuff tends to be very expensive. Kids stuff tends to be very expensive. Homeschool, if it's becoming like a farmed out thing, suddenly it's very niche and very expensive. But then maybe you can go find basically the same thing over here that can do the same purpose. Even like when you're talking about having like a guide for like a nature school or something. Ashley, you're talking about Pokemon apps. Like that's one thing we haven't really talked about is, you know, there's an app for that, right? In so many things, there's an app for that. Like if you want a naturalist guide, there's like Seek, get it on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Or Merlin. Like there's so many other little things that are free like that we can utilize. But yeah, targeted tends to make the price go chin, 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 right up there.
And sometimes maybe you do want a nature guide who really knows what they're talking about, but then you can find those targeted days where it's like, oh, there's an early morning walk for this, or there's a firefly walk for this. Like those, there is so much more available. I'm not even just talking about homeschooling, just in general. I feel like there's so much that communities offer, and they're probably calling out for people to come and participate, right? Because they're creating all these things. And so you can find those targeted things that you're interested in. And then, as you said, Anne, like for the things that you find yourself with a couple of hours on a Saturday afternoon or whatever, yeah, just either use an app or wonder about it for a little while. Like that's the other thing, this world that we live in now, that we feel like we have to know the answer to everything all the time. I can think of so many things as a kid, especially because I had sometimes like a decent sized rural school bus ride. And I remember looking at some of the same trees each season through the year. And I probably didn't know what type of tree that was, but like, that's okay. I still appreciated it. I still note, like I can think of certain things I would notice along the route. So this idea that we have to like have knowledge or skill with everything that we do, I think we can just take the pressure off ourselves sometimes. And like, there was something back there that one of you said though, that reminded me of this kind of idea that came to me a few years ago around like, I think it was Ashley, you were talking about staying open and flexible with your time. And it was this idea of like, I wonder what will come up today. And so I find I'm doing that even for my own life. And it stops me a bit from becoming resentful if something interferes with all the plans I had made. But it also keeps me curious because it's like, and I think at that time there were a few concrete examples. I might have mentioned them in this post, but one was like, we had been at a field trip, an out of town field trip, and then my daughter had a choir Christmas party, and there was one of those secret Santa exchanges, and I was like, oh, we've got to find, we're already running late. There's traffic, and now we've got to try to find this present to buy. And I was just sort of thinking, like, what if buying that present was the activity that afternoon? Now, we might have still chosen to go on this field trip. I don't mean not to do those things, but I would find myself kind of like taking things, they would almost become like an imposition when they could have become a really interesting thing to do for somebody, to really go out and mindfully buy something that somebody might like, package it nicely, not be rushed for the process. And so I think we stick these things in when they could be the learning themselves. I mean, even your aquarium example, I think any family getting an aquarium is going to learn some stuff, but doing it in a more rushed way so they can just have an aquarium is going to feel really different than making the aquarium a part of your focus, right? And I think the other thing that happened around that time, my father-in-law had passed away. This was maybe a little bit later actually then, but we got something in the mail from the treatment set, like the hospital he'd been at. And it was like, it was a very simple craft, but they were doves or something like that. And you could personalize it and add it and it goes onto their wall. And I can think of times in my life that were just busy and it would be like another piece of mail that would come in. And I was like, no, what if we did this though? Like, what if we spent the time to do this and it'll be on the wall at the hospital and we didn't just do it, but I remembered to mail it in and like all the steps, right? Because I would think about that and I'm like, okay, we'll do it, but I won't get it out to the mailbox and blah, 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 blah. But if I think about, well, what's going to come my way today? And I'll consider, you don't have to prioritize everything, but I'll consider prioritizing that. Suddenly your day gets really full with just the stuff that you were already doing. Could be grocery shopping. But if you're not rushing through grocery shopping, then you're taking a minute to talk to the cashier. And you're, noticing whatever on your way out the door. So I don't know. That was just I guess that's just a different mindset that I think allows us to feel a little bit more abundant.
Yeah, I think it's why it also makes it tricky when people ask that question when we run into them, like, what are you learning about? Or what did you do today? And you're like, you've done a lot, but it's all so intertwined in just what it is that you're doing. So it's hard to just pick something out and say, well, this is the thing I did today. And then that also made me think, Erin, how yeah, that is such a nice way to slow down and think about things and see how rich and full and joyful it is, and just be grateful and appreciate to have the time to do those things. Um, and then it also makes me think about how sometimes, like I think about our garden. Our garden, I'm not huge into gardening. The kids show interest in it here and there, and we usually always kind of throw something in a garden. And some years it's, we really slow down and we really I don't know, I guess embrace the opportunity and we think out what we're going to plant and what we're going to buy. And then there's this year where we hadn't got to it. And I was like, well, I really want to get something in there. And it was kind of like a quick trip to the garden nursery. And the kids, it was hot and crowded and they were okay, but we didn't embrace it, but it wasn't a bad thing. Like we were kind of going with the flow. And we got home and we were all going to plant it together, but I ended up planting it by myself. And I could have thought like we were supposed to do this together and maybe resentful and maybe like, feel like they were missing out or something. But I think they were busy playing with like our new badminton set or something and they were content. And I just planted it and I was fine with it. So, if this season goes by and the garden isn't much of a thing, that's okay too. It's made room for other stuff. And then, maybe next year it'll be more of a thing, maybe not. So it's just, yeah, that like openness, I think, that flexibility. And I really liked how earlier you guys were talking about well, I won't go back to it, but it made me think about also, being open and flexible, but also thinking outside of the box too about when these things can come up. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
one thing I like to do is make random connections. Like that was the moon study this month was kind of showcasing that and talking about that, where it's like, don't necessarily think if we're bringing up this topic or this is happening, that it's just going down this path. It's like, what else does it make you think of? And so, yeah, it had like, I was working on these flow charts where it's like, well, here's the first three thoughts that pop to mind when we do this. And then it goes to this, 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 and maybe find something way more interesting. So just being open to like, if it's the strawberry moon, there might not have been a lot of strawberry going on.
Right.
Like I said, my moon study, there's not a lot of astronomy going on there. There's not necessarily a lot of art. We did actually kind of embrace the strawberry thing this year, just because the idea of berries is so fun that we don't really understand what a berry is. And strawberries are not berries. So we had a lot of fun that day at the grocery store, being like, well, let's take home this watermelon berry and let's take home this tomato berry. And wait, this is not a berry. We can't take that. So we had a great time picking out food that day. But it's that you don't necessarily start at point A and go to point B. You may go from point A to point 3. I don't know. You can wind up in other places. So I like leaving room for just making really random loose connections and seeing where it goes.
Yeah. Anything else? I do have one more thing. I just wanted to talk about like kind of teenage stuff or high school year possibilities for a minute. But is there anything else coming to mind for either of you before I do that? No? Okay. No, I was just going to say that something that I really found to be, not always entirely free, but pretty cost effective for kind of building skills and knowledge and just, I don't know, just kind of when we're talking about this sort of rich, kind of having a rich life and a kind of rich opportunities is I think we're often in consumer mode as parents, like, okay, what could we buy our kids? What can we sign them up for? Like, what can we consume from somebody else? And I think some of the really cool experiences we've had have been more like service experiences because there are so many places that are looking for volunteers or, being part of like something that's a little bigger than yourself. So we've had 2 different experiences, for example, with a provincial park. One was with trail building. So like building the footpaths in forests and an accessibility ramp, like a wheelchair accessibility ramp to bathrooms, and also working in the history, like the interpretation center. And then our most recent one was a couple years ago, I guess, with an endangered bird species and partnering with a group that was part of a protection program. And so that gave access to different things. Like the endangered species one gave really regular contact with a biologist and also just with other people that were interested and knowledgeable about birds. And it also gave an opportunity to kind of learn and pass that information on to the public when they were there. And the footpath one, what a great experience just to work with it tended to be a group of men. Some of them were like nearing retirement. And because I think that for us with the provincial park, you can't kind of take on a substantial role below 18. You have to have somebody with you. I guess it's probably so that people just aren't dropping off all kinds of high school kids for volunteer experiences. So anyway, for better or for worse, I got to be part of all of those experiences, the history one, the building, and the bird. And they were just such rich experiences. And so it was a way to serve and to kind of give back, but also a way to gain so much knowledge and such good things if we're just thinking on a practical level for resumes. So I just wanted to throw that in there and you've tapped into some of that stuff even at a younger age, but I also just wondered if you would talk about your recent history, the few events you've been doing this spring at the library.
Yeah, the Chautauqua Festival is super fun. And I think one thing that's great about having the time as homeschoolers is that whether, because we've also volunteered on something, informally volunteered at the state park, is that we were talking about building those relationships. We have been going to the History Festival now since it's actually their first full year here in town, we've realized. The first year they did a full show. They'd done a partial show the year before that we had not gone to. So he was 6. He's now 10. So we've been going year after year. And so now there's a relationship where they know each other, and he'll go up and talk to different people. It's not always the exact same performers, but there are some who come like every year. And so you get to go have a conversation and learn. And then beyond that, like on some of those library things or state park things, he's just used to being included. So he's like, can I help? Can I help you pack stuff up? Can I help put away? So like we've had festivals at the state park and stuff where I didn't even know it, but suddenly my kid has on a volunteer shirt that he wrangled from somebody, and he's going around helping do all the cleanup and helping vendors pack stuff away. So I like that he gets the chance to just feel naturally included, and it doesn't necessarily need me to go through and do. I mean, I'm there, like you said, I'm there, but he doesn't necessarily need me to facilitate it. And then when he gets to see these things, the relationship, like with the Chautauqua Festival, that becomes a driving force for him. If we feel a personal connection to stuff, because he loves live performance, but then the fact of the connection with these people, it feeds an interest where then it's well, I could see myself doing that, I would be interested in doing that. Whereas otherwise, he'd always tell you he's too shy, he wouldn't want to get on stage, those kinds of things. And yet, like, that resonates. So it's an opportunity to have something resonate and show them what it can really look like. And then if you get a chance to reach out and kind of touch the people and talk to them, they're real. And suddenly it's feasible of like, yeah, maybe I could do this. Maybe this could go somewhere. And then you have the opportunity for the conversations we were having about, well, how do you do that? What does it look like? What are the elements of it? What kind of things do you need to know? How deeply do you research? How do you make it engaging? How do you make the character fit you? So like it has so many more elements that come into it than just like, we're going to go to a presentation today.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like when you say that, Anne, it's like so many pieces in one. Like there's like a theater perspective, there's a history perspective, there's like a community end of things, and like so many good things in life, like so many good things in life. It's like a combination of factors, right? Yeah, and I'm sure they love having that level of enthusiasm. And I think I guess that's kind of what I'm talking about around people. There's often people offering things that it would be interesting, like they're wanting that participation too. There are lots of people offering stuff that like, yeah, not everything's for profit. It's like, I'm even thinking when you were talking about how that confidence came in kind of a roundabout way, because kids are so different. And there was a church, a church, and then ended up being our church at one point, that did like a blacklight puppetry. And my daughter, who is, I mean, she was doing ballet and choir, so I wouldn't say that it's not so much stage fright, but to be right out there acting, I think is a different thing. But put her behind with a puppet, and it was like, oh wow, like there was this whole personality that came out. I think she ended up being like the lead. She was like grandpa something that narrated the whole thing. But if that had been her as a person, she would never be probably the kid that you would say, oh, let's give her the lead, because she doesn't kind of exude that like theater confidence. But put it behind a puppet with a black light, this whole other thing came out. That's a little bit of an aside, but the point is, I guess, that those are the opportunities that are easy to miss if we get too busy. But there was a group of people who'd had all these supplies donated, and they were just really wanting, like, kids to come out and use the supplies and be part of it. So some of our like best experiences, we've kind of tapped into that way. And the only other thing I wanted to say about teenage stuff was just a couple of things that we did invest in around art, like semi-private art lessons. I think there were like 3 or 4 kids in that. And one of my sons did for several years, like one-to-one woodworking mentorship. And so, I mean, those things did cost money and they were quite semi-private, but I don't know, you can find people who are doing things at very reasonable prices if they're passionate about doing it. But the other thing that I found about that is by having just a really good connection with the person, actually ended the woodworking, we ended up offering more money because I was like, this is not enough for the value that we're getting. But that was a conversation. We were able to say, hey, come January, we would really like to pay this. What are you thinking about that? It's like a more personalized way of doing things. Or with the art, I think we went from like 4 or 5 girls to just 2. So we realized that art teacher wasn't going to be making very much money with just the 2. But again, we could have a conversation. So there's something there about just like developing those connections with people that you're having like natural, authentic conversations. Like, hey, we could afford this in this many months. How do you feel about that? It just feels like a very human way somehow of like doing business that we don't always think about doing. So,
yeah. It makes me think, well, I was just going to add quickly, kind of going back to what you said, Erin, about like how with parents kind of thinking about consuming, right? Like buying the things and signing up for the things and stuff. And then you mentioned the service and volunteer stuff. It also made me think, and this is kind of probably along with what you're saying with art and woodworking, but kids having, because I know with my kids, I've had conversations about being a consumer versus being a creator. So I think, I mean, little ones can obviously be creators too. But as the kids get older, I think more opportunities to be the creator rather than just the consumer. And an example for us that I've started to see this in would be, I had 2 examples. Well, the one that I can still think of is, it's like video game development. There's been a little bit of interest there, and they've dabbled in that. And also creating like your own YouTube videos or your own tutorials. So starting out as the person playing video games that someone else has developed, and then usually with friends. But I think like if the interest continues, I've already thought about how finding other people who are just kind of further along in doing that, being able to pass on knowledge, like what you said, Erin. I don't know how we would arrange it for sure and exactly what that would look like, how informal, formal, but just keeping in mind that I think as kids get older, they're usually interested in not just continuing to consume, but start create. And I will just also add, like with the video game thing, because I've noticed this, I don't know if it's a trend, but I've noticed this thing happening around kids getting into playing video games a lot. And then parents think, let's sign you up for like a coding class and get you creating your own video games. Because I mean, I think most kids who really like playing video games do have a little bit of an interest in trying to create their own. But of course, some try it and for whatever reason, they're not into it. But I have been mindful of what I offer and how much I kind of step in there. Because right now it's mostly like creating games with friends. And I've thrown out there, when there's a struggle to try to figure something out, like, oh, well, maybe there's a tutorial, or let me know if you have, because I know there's even, I think like OutSchool classes now that you can purchase where it's like learn how to code. Well, there's definitely those, learn how to create your own video games. And again, it's kind of what we were saying earlier, where we can kind of almost turn it into something that the kids aren't interested. You really have to let them lead, right? And some kids would be like, yeah, I want to sign up for that. My kids like, no, thank you. Figuring this out on my own. Okay. But yeah, I just think that it just made me think about that, where especially as they get older, they're looking for opportunities to try these things, whether it's through a volunteer opportunity or becoming the creator. And then that can look a whole bunch of different ways.
I'm glad you said that, Ashley, because that makes me remember that with the woodworking, we approached, this wasn't something that this carpenter was offering. I just knew, I think, that of some of the work he was doing, or somebody else told me about it, and someone else kind of helped connect us. But yeah, it was us going and saying, hey, you've got this cool little shop and we hear you do this custom work for people. And we hear you're quite good with people. So would you be interested, right? Would you be interested in Friday afternoons? And we didn't even know what that would look like. Like, would that be my son watching the work he was doing and kind of being an apprentice? Because we were kind of thinking, I think, apprenticeship initially, but then it seemed to fit better. I think we kind of ended up with the word mentorship, because it was more like, my son always had a project he was working on, and so he would use, and so that was more dedicated time. So that, of course, from a price perspective, feels a bit different. Getting help from somebody versus the carpenter setting his time aside to actually work on my son's project. But again, it's just like that natural, like, let's approach this person. Maybe they'd be open to this. And like, we don't exactly know what the price would be. So let's talk about it and figure out what feels fair and like what's manageable on both ends. And that's what I could see. I mean, I know you're not necessarily saying that you're going that route with the gaming, but I could see that same type of thing. Not that there's anything wrong with the outschool.
No.
I have a kid like for themselves now as an adult, always getting a course, constantly doing courses. Courses for things I think she already knows how to do, but she loves the course, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing anything wrong about the outschool course, but there is this market around everything now. And like, how cool would it be if you found somebody there could be like a one-to-one, especially because that could be virtual. When you're talking about gaming, woodworking's a little trickier. We needed that equipment. But yeah, so I guess I'm just thinking, like, for people to keep their eyes open beyond what's the lesson that we can sign up for, what other person might be interested in mentoring. And if that had been a person of retirement age, that might not have even cost us much. Like, somebody might have just really appreciated having that camaraderie with my son. So it doesn't always have to cost money, right? But we just wanted to be fair to his, time and space. But
Yeah, and I just could see that going again, exactly what you were saying. Obviously, some people I like to sign up for courses and I enjoy them and it's what I'm looking for. But I think for some kids, especially, like just thinking about your son in the woodworking, like you get so much more out of it if it's in a way, like I don't know, I could see it being a very different experience. And then for that person who you found wasn't trying to market that, so then they're probably feeling much more open and flexible to figure out a way together as to like, what are we really looking for here and what would we both really enjoy here,
yeah.
and then that becoming more valuable because it would be like customizable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And anything else before we pop off?
I guess to that, it was making me think of like, I'm not the most social bug. My kid has made me step out of my comfort zone, because networking and just talking to people can give you so many resources you had no idea were around. And my kid just kind of gets to know people, and so therefore I get to know people. And he has a desire to get to know people. And when he interacts with them, it's just amazing how many opportunities pop up. After years of me living up here, this winter we were talking to a neighbor. We were walking their mail out to him when we had a bunch of snow. And of course, my kid would sit and talk to him forever, and we learned he makes knives. And so now my son has an invite to come see how that works. And then, from getting to know the Rangers, there's things where suddenly we'll be off on a lark with them. Or then at the job we're going to this afternoon, we have gotten to know somebody who does work there as well. And so my son had an invite to come watch his new metal building be delivered and help install it if he wanted to. And he's always had an interest in like heavy equipment. And we've known people where we stop by their house and the next thing you know, he's helping to drive their excavator around, and it's like, people like to share. I've just found people like to share what they know and what they love and what they enjoy. And so if you're kind of willing to get to know people and just find out what they do, then you never know where that can go. It's definitely taken us into a lot of really random adventures, been even people showing him photography where, I'm working and they're like, oh, let's go take a walk. And then they're like, well, I'll bring my camera along. And then they have this really nice, I don't know anything about cameras, but like a long lens and showing him how it all works. And he'll get all absorbed. So you just never know when something will come along just from stopping to talk to somebody for a minute and see what they've got going.
Okay. Yeah. I think it really is just like it's a mindset, isn't it? Of just that openness to looking around, talking to people, keeping your eyes open. And I love, Anne, that it's not always just about us keeping our eyes open. It's keeping our eyes open about and our ears open to what our kids are noticing too. I love that. Love that. Okay. So I think what I will try to do, in the links as well, because I just want to be mindful that for some people, they might, they either maybe need one depending on like their state or provincial requirements or whatever, or maybe they want to have more of like a structured kind of homeschool, or maybe their kids are looking for something specific. I'm going to try to link some different like resources as well, as far as like some free curriculum. There's all kinds of people doing either free or low cost unit studies, and you've got so much good stuff on your website. So I will link some of your stuff too. But there are entire, like, there's a couple in particular. I'm trying to think. One is called Easy Peasy Homeschool. I'll have to look up some others who, like, families have just very generously said, like, hey, grade 3 math, grade 7 science, right? So if you're wanting to kind of tap into something, and of course people can use it as sort of specifically or not as they want to, but I love that people have done that. They've kind of put together their own stuff and they've said, hey, I put this together for my family and I'm offering it online. So I'll find a few things.
Even I would say some of the biggies, like the only real paid curriculum we use is math. And I think pretty much everything The Good and the Beautiful has is also available as a free download.
Oh,
I know their math was like, and they're enormous downloads. For us, we just like to work off of a book, but I know I've downloaded, is it even like their bird watching journal? I don't think there's anything they have that is not also, I could be wrong on that, but I know like all their math and all that. If you want to download and print off all that, it's all free.
Well, because that's the interesting thing too. Like, it's not even about what type of homeschooler are you. Like, sometimes even if you aren't a unit study person, you have a kid who's really interested in a topic, and it would just be really fun to find a unit study for that. Even if you're just pulling, we use so much. Oh my gosh, the Sunlight book list of historical fiction was huge. I feel a little badly. I didn't purchase their stuff, but they offered their whole book lists. So we spent so much time reading those books. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you are also thinking really more conventionally, like, how do I get curriculum or how do I get learning resources at a low cost? There's also ways of doing that really specifically too. So, and all the different free apps and online stuff too. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Anne.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught me at the last minute there and I had time to jump on.
Yeah, and thank you to your son for getting stuff organized for your work this afternoon so that you had time to meet. That's kind of like, it works with what we're talking about, right? Just having flexibility to be able to do the real life learning. So, yeah. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Haley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. Erin can be found at Everlearning. And I, Ashley, can be found on Instagram at AshleyAsMama and at Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.